All right. So today we are looking at React Router, which is a very powerful React library to help with what's called routing, which is the different pages of our app. Because thus far in my application up here in the URL bar, well, you know, like most websites, maybe I want a home page, maybe I want, a list of users, and I want to have different pages on my app. And we have not built that functionality into our React apps yet. So that's what React Router is going to help us do. And we're going to discover it does a lot of other very powerful things for us along the way. And just to do a little bit refresher on sort of routing and how this is relevant for single page apps. Excuse me. Let's go to my favorite page, Wikipedia, for just a minute. And let's look for, cats. And let's scroll down a bit. Let's find something else that we can click on, like a farm cat. So now we have a couple links. And let's talk about the things that we already can do to control the URL bar in the browser. And as a reminder, the way Wikipedia works and the way sort of traditional web pages work, things that are not single page apps like what we're learning to build in React, is every time I navigate somewhere, the browser is requesting a new HTML page from the server. Right? And it's a little hard to see, but the browser requests a brand new HTML page every time I click on something. If I scroll all the way up here again, we'll refresh it and we'll click on, Predator. And there we see the browser made an HTTP request to a server somewhere in Wikipedia. Maybe it was written in Flask or Django, like we'll learn to use soon. And the server sent back a ton of HTML with all these links with image assets and all this HTML. And the browser ran through that HTML step by step and rendered it to the screen and loaded whatever JavaScript there is. And this is your sort of classic web page. And what we're learning to do with single page apps is sort of do it completely differently. Because with React, like if I want to change stuff, I might use Axios to make some AJAX requests to get data from various places or APIs, but the browser doesn't need to load a whole new HTML page. And as we saw, my JavaScript actually adds whatever HTML elements we want to the DOM. So similarly, with the single page app, and the context here is frameworks like React evolved when companies had to do things like create Google Maps, where that idea of you click on a link and it loads a new HTML page totally breaks down. When I'm using Google Maps and I'm searching for, I don't know, a museum, right? I want my app to be able to do a lot of stuff without having to refresh the page every time. And in fact, it does. And every time I'm typing, Google is in fact making an API call to search. Every time I type a letter, we can see right here, and it's sending back a whole bunch of data in JSON format in some probably overly complex structure. That's the Google Maps API. And, maybe I click on restaurants instead, and I'm doing all this stuff. And the important thing here to note is that the page has never refreshed, right? Our browser has not loaded a new HTML page. We haven't seen that screen flicker. And when that does happen, whatever JavaScript we have running is just like when you stop any program that's running and restart it, whatever was saved in that JavaScript program's memory is gone. So like if I'm over here if I refresh the page, we're going to see a couple things come back. But the reason is actually this stuff here in the URL bar. And note how if I click just for an example on Northwestern School of Law, all of a sudden stuff has been added into the URL bar. And so this JavaScript program, and I think Google probably uses a different JavaScript framework called Angular, but it's very similar to React. This could be written in React. One really important and valuable thing it does is control the URL bar in the browser. And one reason that's important is because if I have a link from a website that I want to share with my friend, and I'm dumping this link in our Zoom chat, not because the link matters, please ignore it, but just for demonstration purposes, then that's how we share stuff over the web. So there's this idea of that important state about my application should live in the URL bar, because then that link can be shared. It's also useful because if I do refresh the page, some of this stuff comes back. And the reason it does is because it's here in the URL bar and in what's called query params, all of this stuff after sort of the main part. And in fact, let's go ahead and delete this URL bar is massive. This URL is massive. As you can see, they've thrown a ton of stuff in here. But let's just, let's see if I can delete some of it without deleting all of it. If we get rid of the rest of this, and now I hit enter and do a page refresh, the Google Maps JavaScript program has reloaded, and it doesn't have that data in the URL bar to use to know where it should go. So that's another value of putting things in the URL bar, is if the user refreshes the page, well, our JavaScript program has to start over, but it can look at the URL bar and get some information such as latitude and longitude, or if the user was looking at like a distillery nearby them and stuff like that. And, you know, I showed the other day how there's the window object in JavaScript, and how this actually lets us set and control the URL bar. And similarly, we actually have access to the browser's history through what's called the history object, which is also on the window object in JavaScript. And if we look through here, there's some interesting stuff. We see state, URL, and let's go over to our Wikipedia page where we've done a little more navigating and explore this just a bit, just to see a little context. So this is a big JavaScript object. Somewhere in here is probably the data we care about. This length of 5 is probably the history of the 5 things we've looked at. There's a function back and forward, both of which sound really intriguing, that we'll look at in just a minute. I'm not sure where hiding in here is like there is an actual array that holds all of the websites we visited, but what we can demonstrate is window history back, and I am going through the history of where I browsed. So our JavaScript program has access to the browser's history of the URL bar that's used for these back and forward buttons and everything else. And the reason I wanted to start off talking about this a bit is just to set the stage a bit for what we're going to use this library, React Router, for, right? Because I want, in my app, just like with Google Maps, I might want to have like a user ID up here, and then I can share that URL with everyone in the chat or my friend, and they can look that person up. And I want my React app to be able to look at the URL bar and say, oh, we need users 1, 2, 3. Let me get the information for the user with the ID of 1, 2, 3, or what have you. And just like how Google Maps did all of this without refreshing the page, which would cause our React app to start all over and create a bad user experience, we want to be able to control the URL bar and the browser history without constantly refreshing the page. And that's the main thing that React Router does for us. It also helps us sort of organize our React application more, but that's really its main goal. So we're going to be learning about React Router, or I believe is the library is called React Router DOM. We're going to install it. We're going to see how to hook it up. There's a couple setup steps to use it. And then we're going to see a simple and I think a good structure for how I can create components that I'll call different pages and connect those pages to paths or routes, right? And a route or a path, these terms get used interchangeably. This would be the user's route. This would be the homepage route or path. This would be the about page path or route. We're going to see how to set up an error page if our user tries to go to a page that doesn't exist now that we have paths and routes. And then we're going to see how we can set up some navigation the React Router way. So I just want to pause and check in and see if folks have any questions before we dive in. Cool. And was that sort of like 26-minute overview of the history of single page apps sort of useful context, or things that people are already kind of familiar with? Okay, awesome. There's one more thing I want to mention here, just to file away in the back of your minds as we get into this. We've talked about routing on the front end and the back end, right? You all got a taste of that with Flask. And in fact, let's do a quick little TL draw here. I might have a server, and my server might have, you know, like a user, a couple routes maybe for all users. Maybe we have like the root route. Maybe we have like, I don't know, a login route as well. Over here, I've got my client, which is the browser. And let me make something ovally for our URL bar just for demonstration purposes. Just so we to try and indicate that this isn't like part of the thing. And I might have, you know, in here, I've got my React app, and it could have a number of different pages. And in the URL bar, I might have, you know, localhost 5173 about. I could have 5173 users. I could have 5173 favorite food. This is called front-end routing, and this is completely separate from the routes that we create on the server. Now, some of these names might be the same for organizational purposes. Like if I go to, you know, user 123, we probably need to make an HTTP GET request to that route, you know, like, you know, get user 123 to get that data. But that's something that we're actually going to write in our React code. You know, if for some reason I wanted to name this differently and have it be, maybe it's for students. So maybe for my backend, I'm calling the route user, because students are users, but maybe I want the route that, like, you know, when you and I are using the app, what we see in the URL bar, I want it to be /students. So this front end routing is completely separate from anything on the server. Tim, yes, sir. You might be muted.
Double muted. Anyway, outside of making it easier to read in the URL, why would you make it different from what's on the server? Wouldn't it be easier just to make it all the same information across the board?
Great question. The server's job for a single page app is to send us data. If I go to the About page, I probably don't need to talk to the server to get data at all, because I can just have a React component with whatever text and styling and CSS I want to show for the About page. So our server really becomes our own API. So think about the Poke API, and like if you're making a React app, right? Like you might want to have different pages with different names in the front end of your app. And sometimes they need to talk to the Poke API to get data, and sometimes they don't. But you don't want like the URL bar of your app and what the user sees to correspond to the Poke API, because that wouldn't make sense, right? You want to make what makes sense for the user and for the front end. And the server's job is really just to send back data. So these are really completely separate things.
So you can pull from any kind of server and make it whatever you want in your URL, right?
Exactly. That's a great point as well. Like we might have my fancy page where we need to maybe make API calls to a bunch of different APIs. I don't know what, but let's just pretend maybe we needed to, maybe this is a Pokemon API. So maybe our server that we write has like the user account data or whatever, but the Pokemon API has some Pokemon info that we need. Just I'm making something up here. And yeah, so our React app, what we'll see when we get into it later is sometimes we actually want our server to be the one talking to other APIs, but sometimes we might want our React app to be doing it as well. And there's nothing stopping it from doing that. So these are
Why would you want
completely
it
separate
for a server?
applications.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, yeah. We'll get into it later. It's mainly for reasons of like authentication and some other stuff that's a little out of scope right now. But mainly like around like authentication and security. Awesome. How are people feeling with the basic concept that, and I wanted to touch on this because the terms are really similar, right? We talk about routing, but we're going to have front end routing and back end routing now. And they're two completely separate things. And once we start building it out, it will help, it will start to make more sense as well. Okay, awesome. So let's start doing, Momo, yes, sir.
This related by any mean to when we set property in one of our component to prevent default.
Mm-hmm.
Is this related to that one? I feel there is relation between both, right?
No, that's something a bit different.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I realize I've been doing a lot of talking too, and it's a little abstract right now. And I think once we start building it and seeing it, it will help make this more concrete. So it's okay if some of this made sense and some of it didn't quite make sense. I just want you all to file it away in the back of your heads as we now start working with React Router. So let's start using React Router and adding stuff to our app. So I am going to kill the dev server, and I have my React project here because I do have to install React Router. So I'm just going to run npm install, and the package name is React Router DOM. And if you Google React Router, it'll pop up here. They actually have pretty great docs and a really nice feature overview. And as they say here, the term is client-side routing or front-end routing. And they, in their own words, sort of express what I was saying as well, is that we are going to be able to update the URL from our React app without the browser having to request the new HTML page from the server, and it will improve the user experience and a number of things. And so, you know, if we go through the tutorial, they have some setup steps. Luckily, this is really the only installation step we need. There are a couple other things we'll need to do just to kind of give a quick overview of the React Router page's docs. They have a number of examples which are quite good. Really, all the docs are quite good. They have a section here on main concepts that is worth reading. And the history stack is what we just saw with window.history in the browser, right? We were just talking about the URL and routes, and we'll be digging into this more later. They also have some useful definitions here, I think. Again, I sort of gave the short version overview of this, but if you would like to dig into it a bit more and read about these concepts, then their main concepts page is quite good, and a lot of these things we will be going over shortly. And then they have a pretty good documentation on things like there's different components that we use. There's going to be some hooks that they create that we're going to use, and their documentation on all of these things is pretty good, which we'll see as we get in there. Like you can see for this particular hook, which we'll learn about later, we get to see how it's used, and we see all the different properties and stuff like that. All right, so let's go ahead and get this guy hooked up. I've gone ahead and installed it. And well, the browser over here just complains because there's no dev server right now. Let's do a couple other steps. We're going to be creating pages now. So I want to be able to organize that nicely. So in my sources directory, I'm going to create a folder named pages. And we'll make a components folder too, just like we did before. And so now components will be, you know, smaller components, like maybe a header or a nav bar that gets used between pages, but I will make a about page component and a home page component, and I'll put them in this directory named pages just to help keep my world organized. The main thing you have to do with React Router, and this is what we're going to do now, is you need to tell it how you want it to organize stuff. And let me go ahead and make this file. And this is where a lot of the work when you're using React Router will go. And the file is named router.jsx. And it's not inside pages or components. And let's start building this up and seeing what it looks like. We're going to have to do some importing, and I'll bump the font size up a bit for this. This is I believe it's a hook. This is what's going to use to create our router for us. We're going to need to import the different components that we want React Router to do stuff with. So we're going to have to import app, our main app component. And, you know, it'd be nice if we had like some sort of homepage component or something we could use as we build this out. So let's go ahead and create a homepage component right now. And I'm just going to name it homepage.jsx. I suggest for every component that's a page, name it something page so that when you're looking at it, it's easier to identify it. And let's make this really simple. I'll just note right here, it's going to be a homepage. I'm going to name it homepage. It's not going to take any props. It's not going to do any state. I think for now, all it's going to do is return an H2 that says homepage. And can someone remind me what I have to do to export this homepage component so I can now import it in router, import it into the router.jsx?
Export the homepage.
Yeah, exactly.
Export default homepage.
Perfect. Thank you, Momo. Yeah, this is our default export. There's not multiple things in this file, so we can just do export default homepage. And now I'm just going to go ahead and import it here as well as sort of a setup step. And now let's start building out this router. And what the router does is it looks at the browser URL bar. And if the URL bar is, say a home, it will load the homepage component. Basically, it's sort of like a bunch of if statements. And let's build this out and see what this looks like. So we're going to create an object router. We're going to use this create browser router function. This function is going to take an array as an argument. And like we've seen in vite.config and with tailwind.config, we're going to stick a whole lot of configuration stuff for our router in here. And I'm going to go ahead and export this right now so I don't forget. And it's going to be the default export as well. And we'll come back to what we do with that in a minute. But so inside here, I have an array. And for each URL that I want to render a particular page for, I need to add it as an object, as an individual route or path. And we need to start with the root path for our whole application. Mikhail, yes, sir.
Is router not capitalized because it's not a component?
Good question. Yes, it is. I'm pretty darn sure it is not a component. And we'll see that in a couple minutes when we actually use it to hook it up to the rest of the app. And actually, let me do a quick double check because I'm like 99.9% sure that router is not a component, but let me just make sure I haven't lost my mind. Yeah, it's not a component. We'll see what it is in a little bit. It is essentially a very fancy JavaScript object that this function is going to like add a lot of stuff to, and that we're going to use with some other code from the React Router DOM library. So this should start to look a little familiar. And let me go ahead and run npm run dev just to get the dev server going. And let's go to our app. And let me go ahead and open up the console again and just refresh it so we see stuff. So this is what we already have, right? What is the route or path? of the app component, well, it's the root route of our whole application. There is no route. Or rather, it's the root route. So it's just slash. So this is, you always need to add this, right, to give it the root of our routing tree, and tell it where app is. And then all of the other routes are going to be based off of this. And we call these child routes, right? So the slash by itself is actually a route. The about page becomes a child route of that, and the home page becomes a child route of that, and so on. And the way we represent that here is in this JavaScript object that holds all the important information about this route, what the path is, what component to render. We tell React Router that this route will have children, and this is another array. And it will take another JavaScript object with route information. And this is going to be the home page. So we're going to set the element to the home page right here. And note that I have to render the component here. I'm not passing it as a definition. We actually want the JSX element. And I have two options now. If I want to, I could do path home. And then what we're doing is we're telling React Router, and we'll see in a minute, hey, if the URL is this, show the home page. But in fact, I don't want a home route. I think I want the home page to always show up on our root route, because that would make sense. Like when you go to wikipedia.org, you don't go to wikipedia.org/home. So we're going to indicate that this is the base route or index route. And we can use this property index, which we'll set to true. And we'll add more to this in a minute, but this is a good start. And let's get this set up and rendering. Brandon, yes, sir.
So React manipulates a virtual DOM and pushes that information as requested. And then React Router is essentially creating a virtual router object model, and then manipulating that based on what the user needs.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to look at it. It's definitely creating this. It's not
exactly
sort of
like
the
the
same
DOM
technology as the virtual DOM, but you have the right concept. This is basically like a virtual router model, and then updates it based on what the user does, or we can control it too, which we'll see. And then just like how the virtual DOM updates the real DOM, the React router will actually update the browser's URL bar.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's
Thank
a
you.
great analogy. So, now my next step is how do I make this work, right? Because I can go ahead, I can import the home page. I could put it right here. And now it renders and it shows up, but this is not what we want, right? Because we want this to change depending on the URL bar. This needs to be dynamic. So, just importing and rendering homepage here isn't going to help me. And in fact, as we get deeper into React Router, what we'll see is that it lets us add routing, like child pages can have their own routes, and it has a lot more complex behavior. So we really want any part of our React application to be able to use React Router. And if I pull up React DevTools here, So we can see the app component and the homepage component. And this is a Chrome extension, by the way. I highly, highly, highly recommend installing it. Even if you don't use it a ton now, at some point, I think it will be your friend. And the reason I wanted to pull this up is just as a friendly reminder that just the same way that the DOM is a tree, the React components actually form a tree as well. An app is our parent component for a whole React application for the component tree. And just like, say, with state and props, where if I need to share some state through my whole React app, right now, the one way we know to do that is, well, I need to create that state up at the parent level of the tree and pass it down to the child as props. We need to do something similar with React Router. And just to sort of build this out a bit. Let's say this is the whole thing. And then here we have app. And here we have home. And let's make this blue. And, this is what we want to change. And, we might have a nav bar. I didn't make one now, but instead of hello X-ray, we could have a nav bar component. And let me move these inside here so that it's a little easier to tell what's where. And that nav bar is shared, but maybe home changes to about when the URL bar changes and stuff like that. And this forms a component tree, right? I've got app. And right now there's not a lot of children in the tree, but we have two. We've got navbar and we've got home. That one really didn't want to show the right way. And in fact, we'll create a navbar component in a little bit. I don't want to get too far off track from setting up React Router. So for the moment, just pretend this H1 is our navbar component. So I need to set up React Router at the root of my tree up here. Because we might have other components, the homepage might have components as well down the line. Maybe then there's like a user or I don't know, user profile or something like that. So if I need to set up React Router for my whole application to use, what file in my React app might be where I want to go to do that? And I guess I gave away the store a little bit because I just clicked on main.jsx. Brandon, yes, sir.
We going to be passing router in as a prop for the app component?
We are going to be passing router in as a prop, but not into the app component. We're going to import another component from React Router DOM and wrap app inside of that. So you're on the right path. And in fact, let's go ahead and just do that right now so we can see this in action. So in fact, I misspoke a little bit. We're going to get rid of the app entirely because we have app here in our router. So it's now the router's job to take care of that. So what we're going to do here is we're going to import a component called router provider from React Router DOM. And just like it sounds like, this will provide us the router. And I'm going to have to also import that router object that we created. Now, this term provider comes from React. There's something called React context that we'll learn about later. And it's a way of sharing data without directly using props. Like if I have information, like maybe if my app is in light mode or dark mode for some sort of color theme that I want every component in my app to have, it could be a pain to pass that prop down like through like 10 layers of components, what's called prop drilling. And that's one of the classic use cases for React context. So we're not gonna worry about it too much right now. But the way that a provider works, and let me make this a little wider so we can see. And in fact, I guess if we're being really strict in our DOM tree, though we normally don't talk about main, we should, because it's part of the React component tree as well, though nothing really gets rendered. Right, and it has one child, and that child is app. So because I have created this provider up here at the parent level, all of the children have access to it. And I realize my diagram is getting a little off the rails. So let's maybe show this another way. Let's show this with some red arrows. The provider goes all the way down. And any component that's a child of main, which means any component that's a child of app, which means all of these components now can use the router provider. And one moment, Brandon, let me make sure I did not have any typos here and that our code is running. And then we can talk about it and take a look. Though there's a couple other things I actually have to do to make this work. Brandon, one moment, let me add the final piece to the puzzle, and then that'll be a good time to pause and take questions, I think. So we have this router provider, and it uses the router that we've created. And let me go ahead and open up a split here so we can see this. And let's just put, router.jsx here on the left. And we'll put the app here, and we don't need the home page. And main is over there as well. So main is using router provider. App is still hard coded though. This is not very interesting. Now, I at least know that part of React Router works because the app still shows up. In fact, I'll kill and restart my dev server just for my own sanity to make sure everything's working. And if we go to components, all of a sudden our component tree looks crazy different. There is this router provider component, data router, fetchers, things that we don't have to worry about. But this is at least starting to look a little more sane. Something named router, I can get that, right? Provider, app, homepage, right? Which gets rendered inside here. This is not very useful because what happens when we have a different page that we want to render inside the app? Well, what React Router will do is, because we've created this router provider and we can see that there's all these components that don't like directly render stuff, but basically pass data and functionality down into child components, we can use a special component called outlet. And this comes from React Router DOM. And note that there's now an outlet component here, but inside that context provider rendered route, that sounds a little interesting, right? Like, oh, we're figuring out the route that we should render. And it looks like it then eventually renders the homepage. And if I change this to something that doesn't exist, we get an error. We can change the error page ourselves, but that homepage is gone. Right? So what we've essentially done is this is sort of a special component controlled by React Router DOM. Oops, sorry. Let me highlight it the way I want to so I can make it red. And I want this to be red as well. And then it puts whatever belongs here based on the routing inside. Right, so this is, I almost think of it as like some sort of like wormhole. And in fact, I'll put a little oval around it to emphasize the point. You know, it's like one of those science fiction stories where like the wormhole or like the magic gate lets you suddenly go somewhere completely different. Well, React Router DOM kind of magically sticks stuff into the outlet wormhole. Though the reality is we can kind of tell from looking here at the component tree, it's not magic. Under the hood, there are in fact a lot of props being passed, but this provider is doing all of that work for us. And this is, I think, a good point to pause and check in and get questions. Brandon, yes, sir.
Yeah, could you head over to main.jsx?
Yeah.
And then, okay, so router provider is a component which I still need to see router.jsx, please, on the right side.
Here, let me give us a little more real estate. Hold on.
So these two, the way that main.jsx is connected to app is through the router provider component, which, because we have a specified path of route, it is going to return the component app. Exactly. So that's a lot of setup.
And you raise a good point.
So does each child,
like if we change that path,
so does
the router's behavior would change.
Right.
Yes, please.
Does each component need to be a child in order to manipulate that specific page?
You mean, does each component need to be a child in order to do what?
So we have element homepage inside of the children. Are all of our components going to be a child of the app component? Great question.
Essentially, yes. And the reason is because app is at the root route. And in fact, let me go ahead and let's add a couple more pages to add more routes here. And I think that will help illustrate it as well. Murad, yes,
Okay,
sir.
yeah.
Okay, so that means for example, the nav bar will be indexed through, and we put it element to the nav bar here when we pass it to the app.
Close. You raise a really good point, which is actually the
Yeah, we're
nav
gonna
bar is going to be,
in here.
we don't need to add the
Yes.
nav bar to our routing because we'll render the nav bar inside app and everything else gets put inside here. And let me actually go ahead and just do that right now, just so we can see it, because I think that will make it easier for us to talk about it. Because you raise a really good point, Murad, and this is actually a really valuable pattern to see. And one of the next things we're going to do. So I'm going to make a super simple nav bar. It's not going to do much except say nav bar, right? Like what you could do later is you could copy over that bootstrap nav bar if you wanted to use bootstrap, and you could put it in there. And we'll make it do two things. We'll make it say nav bar and hello x-ray, just so it's a little more interesting. And here in app.jsx, so first of all, I don't need to import homepage anymore. The router handles that. Let's put the nav bar right there. And let me go ahead and format this. So, and let's maybe make this a div. And I am doing something that you shouldn't, which is putting like inline CSS in if I can figure out how to do it. Background, color, blue. Let's see if this breaks. And it totally does break because I never ever do like inline CSS styles this way. Oh, though I also need the closing tag on my div over here. The style prop from style properties to values.
Background color should not have quotes next to it. It should only be the value that has quotes.
Oh, interesting. Okay, thank you. That is how infrequently I do this. I see, and it needs an object. Okay, got it. Something
that should be.
Probably this needs to go, and it probably needs to be like that. There we go. So my apologies, folks. This is a JavaScript object. The property is the CSS attribute I want to change, and it needs to be camel case. So what we see here is, and when we add another page, and in fact, let's do that right now just so we can see this in action. And then I think that will give us the things that we need to be able to really talk about stuff. And Chris, I see you have a question as well. And I think I just want to add an about page so that we can have that. And I think that'll help us talk about this. So in fact, I am just going to make about page right here. And I'm going to go ahead and copy this. And we're just going to name it about page. And we'll call this about page. And we'll go ahead and name that about page. And actually, I would love some help in modifying the router to use the about page. And actually, would someone be down to walk me through that process? What's the first thing I probably need to do to add the about page to the router? Well, I got to import it, right? We actually have to import the component itself. And as I think Brandon, it might have been you, as someone pointed out, you know, we want that route about to be based off of this root route. And that's kind of why the app component is a little special, because you usually put it as the root route for the whole thing, right? So let's add another child here. So another JavaScript object. The path is going to be about, and let me make sure that I get my syntax right, because I always getting the slashes wrong is a really easy gotcha. So I don't need a slash in front of a route, in front of about, because it's being added onto this path. So that's the starting slash. I do want a slash at the end of it, because maybe there's going to be a child route that comes after this. So that's the pattern that we want to follow. And now the element is, of course, the about page. And so now let me go and let's look at our component tree, because we can watch homepage change here. Note how if I go to app, I haven't changed app at all. It's just nav bar and outlet. But now if I go to about, we see the about page, and React Router has done the work of unmounting that homepage component. It is off of the DOM entirely and mounting and rendering the about page. Chris, yes, sir.
Never mind. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, I figured once we got a couple other things up there, it would help to kind of like illustrate it a bit. So all of a sudden, this is getting kind of fun, right? And what's really cool is I can use, because we looked at the browser's history, right? Window.history, and React Router hooks into that. I can use that to navigate around. Although right now, I think I'm getting page refreshes, which I'm not sure if I'm getting a page refresh or not, to be honest, because the DevTools does so much stuff. We might be, but that is a bridge we can cross later to get that bit hooked up. I think the cool part is note how, like, let me go to like google.com. If I paste in the about page, this URL, watch what React Router does. React Router looks at that URL bar and renders the appropriate thing, which is super cool. So this is a great point to pause and check in for questions. Eric, yes, sir.
So if you were going to have multiple components on that about page, would you just like list them in that elements line 25, or how would you handle that?
Yeah. So note how app is a little special, right? Because it has the root route, excuse me, and we set it to index, but it's still being handled by the router. And note how I import the nav bar here. And to answer your question earlier, Murad, I only need to import the nav bar into App.jsx once, because it's outside the outlet, and all of app's children get rendered inside this outlet component. Like if I go here to the elements page, let's go to, here's the nav bar.
Yeah, I get this one. Yeah, that's yeah. I just have the same question as like how Eric asked. Yeah, when we now create another children under the about page,
right?
That's what you put backslash. Where are we gonna?
So first off, like if it's a component, like let's say I'll just make a component. I'll just name it some component. We'll just have it return an H3 some random component. And let's export this. If I wanted to add that to the about page, I can do it just like I would with any other component. right? So that's the starting point, that everything with React still works just fine, and we can create and add components and do whatever we want. And I think your guys' question may have been directed more about child pages of the about page. And we can talk about that in a minute or two. Brandon, yes, sir.
I was just gonna ask if we could add a child array to the about page, and that's how we would handle like the routing there. So we would say / us, so it would be like about, and then us would be the directory.
Yeah,
so it was okay.
Exactly. And in fact, let's maybe build this out, and then that might be a good pausing point to build a bit more of this out and see that in action. And then we can break. There are a couple other things I want to show. It might be, well, we can decide if we want to kind of see some more React Router features or start working on an assignment and then come back for part 2. But I think the children one is probably a good one, and then we can take a break. Daniel, yes, sir.
On the app.jsx, is the outlet a reserved word for the router, or can you change that?
Good question. If we go to app.jsx and take a look at it, this is a component that we import from this library. So the import statement, because that's the component's name, and this is not a default import, this is a named import that we can tell from the curly brackets, we have to import outlet. There is a way to rename this if you want to, but you shouldn't, because like we're using React Router. React Router calls it outlet. By keeping it named outlet, it makes it clear to us and all the other programmers that this is a React Router outlet. Does that answer your question?
It does, thank you.
Yeah, totally. So let's do this. Let's take a 10-minute break, and then we'll keep on going. And to answer your guys' question, yes, we absolutely can do something like this, where I might have path is, let's call it, more about, just for fun. And let's have the element be, I guess we'll create one. As long as I'm talking about this, we should just finish the demo. And then after the break, I'll show how we can add a bit more functionality to this. But let's go ahead and make a more about page. There we go. So the lack of autocomplete tells me I probably have a typo somewhere. Function more about page, export default more about page. It indeed is in pages. Let's try importing it here in the router. Okay, so that seems to work just fine. And let me go ahead and close this stuff out so we can see things more easily. I don't think we need the split at the moment. I'll kind of shift it over here so we can see the router. And let's add our more about page. So, and I shouldn't have a path have uppercase. You should keep all your paths lowercase. And one moment, Murad, let me just demo this and then we can take questions and then we'll break. So I indeed have added a child to my child, and fingers crossed, this should be working for us. Let's open up the React Dev Tools components just for fun to watch this happen. So in fact, there is one thing I'm missing here, which is 50% on purpose. And there's a reason why we're not seeing the more about page. Oh, we are. I'm so sorry. My brain, I just had Zoom brain. Well, there's something I'll go into. We can use outlet inside child components, but we'll see that after the break. So here, indeed, we do see that child more about page route, right? Where we have the about page. Oh, it is indeed not showing up. I apologize, folks. Sorry for my confusion there. Let's fix this. So here's the missing piece of the puzzle. And again, apologies for my confusion. React Router needs to know where to put the stuff we want it to render. So just like we had to in App.jsx, we need to import the outlet component. And now we get the more about page inside the about page, right? As a child of it. Brandon, yes, sir.
Would you agree or disagree that the outlet component would be equivalent to like a subdomain? And then everything that happens within that subdomain are the components that are rendered based on
You have the right idea. You just don't want to use the word subdomain because that has a meaning specific to networking.
Okay.
Yeah, but yeah, it's a child is the way I think the terminology here would be like parent and child in a lot of ways. Right, React Router is going to put if we need to render children for a page, it will put it inside the outlet component. And in that sense, you hit the nail on the head. It's just if you say subdomain to someone in tech, they will think about networking, not like networking as in people, networking as in IP addresses. So we can see here that I can have more complex paths and render more stuff. But we can also see why it's important to think about what we want as a child or not a child. Because right now this is getting rendered inside the about page, and that might not be what we want. If we wanted this to be somewhere else, maybe we would want it to be here. Though I may have broken some of the routing.
Thinking you take the about out in the URL.
Oh yeah, thank you so much. That is exactly what we need to do. Right. So it depends how we want our world to be organized. And maybe I don't want some random component to show up on here, or I don't want this to show up here. Maybe I need to make like multiple child components. If I want to get fancy with this, I could like make an index about page component or something. But I think that's getting a little more complex, and we have been going on for a while. So let me show one more useful thing, and then we'll take, I think, and then we'll take a break, and we'll start looking at the assignments and either do some hands-on time or a break in part 2 of the lecture. So the last thing I want to show in the router is a nicer way to handle if we have a route that doesn't work, and we can actually make our own error page. So let me go ahead and here in pages, make an error page component. And it's just going to return an H1 saying this page does not exist. Or let's just have it say this route does not exist for us to make us happy. And let's go ahead and export this. And because this is such an important behavior, React Router provides a very simple way for us to do this, which is inside the route for app. There is a property named error element, and here we can add the error page. And I'm going to go ahead and use VS Code to help import this. Let's see if it has a nice quick fix for me. Nope, wasn't quite smart enough to import it. And so now, fingers crossed, if I go somewhere that doesn't exist, we get our error page, and super easy to add, right? So I just wanted to show that before we break. So we're going to start building a Rick and Morty project over the next couple days. So your assignments are going to build up on top of each other, and we'll do a bit of it in class as well. And so the starting assignment to get going for this is just to create a project with Vite, and to set up a home page and set up a React router. And the homepage should maybe show something to encourage people to watch the show. And we'll be using the Rick and Morty API, which is pretty awesome. And if we go to its docs, the GraphQL stuff we will ignore. The REST API stuff is what we want. And there's a ton of nice stuff that we can get, right? Like a list of all the episodes or a list of all the characters. And it's a pretty well documented API. And let me just go ahead and use Thunder Client real quick to demo it. And let's just try it for, I forget if it's by ID or by name, so let's find out. So it must be by ID, which would make a lot more sense. There we go. So rickandmortyapi.com/API/character and the character ID. And then I get a ton of information about that character, and same with episodes and stuff like that. So maybe like grabbing a little bit of information and showing it on the API. What we're going to cover in part 2 of the lecture is we've covered some of this already. We've seen how to do pages. We've seen how to create routes. But we're going to see how we can use a link component to add links to pages so that React Router can route based on links. So the user can have a user interface to move around. We already added an air page. And there's a bit more with links that we'll dig into as well. There's some sort of power features to links, and we can kind of maybe add it to a nav bar, and we can play around with outlet and go a bit deeper and stuff like that. So that's the plan for part 2. Let me go ahead and pause the recording. All right, so we covered a lot of ground with React Router. And in fact, I think what I'll do is we can sort of quickly review it by building up the project for Rick and Morty. And we'll look at that assignment in a moment. I think I just want to show you guys the one remaining feature that we didn't see, because it's a great feature and it works really well, and it's pretty straightforward. And then we can dive into starting to build out that Rick and Morty assignment. So the one feature I want to show is links, right? Because that's a useful thing to have. And so let's add some links on our nav bar, like to the home page and to the about page. And I'm going to make this like light blue. Does it let me do that? There we go. So we can see, and everyone can see my React app and VS Code, correct? Okay, awesome. And let me go ahead, in fact, and refresh the page so that the URL bar is correct. And let's just go to the home page. So the next obvious thing that we want to be able to do is have links that we can click on to do stuff with. And we've seen how to do that, right? I can add an A tag with an href that is going to be, HTTP localhost 51. I probably don't even need to put the whole URL in there. I could probably just do that, and we can see if that'll work for us. And I'll close the A tag out there. And we'll format this one the same way, where let's add an A tag here, where the href is about. And let's see if this works at all. So this works, right? The URL bar changes. We see the React stuff render. There is one reason, and it's a big reason, that I don't want to set up my links this way with my React app and React Router. I've sort of left a clue to it here in the network tab. Can anyone tell me what that reason might be? Well, the whole page is reloading every time I click on one of these things. And if we clear this and I click, because I know that Vite DevTools puts a ton of stuff in here. So let's maybe look for this URL, right? That's the main one that requests index.html. And you can see it's getting loaded every time. And to make this problem a little more concrete, let's open up App.jsx. Let me put just a console log in here. Let's just say, even better, let's put it in main.jsx. Let's just put a console log here. And we'll say browser loading main JSX. Right, and let's see how often we see that console log message. So every time I click on that, the browser is loading index.html again. Whatever JavaScript React program I have running has been stopped. Everything's been lost, and the whole programming is getting reloaded. So obviously that is not a good user experience, right? Any React state we have is going to be tossed out the window. So I just want to check in with folks and see if this makes sense as to why this is a problem and we don't want this behavior. Because this is a really important concept.
Can you repeat the question, please? I'm sorry.
Yeah. So why, when we're using an href to do our links, it causes a page refresh? And why is that a problem for us? And the answer is because the whole React app restarts and I lose any React component state. It's like if you all were working on the OOP assessment with the user interface in the terminal and the program stopped and restarted every time the user put something in. You wouldn't be able to get very far. So we need a different way to make links happen, and React Router provides that for us with a component named link. And thankfully, it is really similar to the href. I think the prop name is a little different, so I'm actually going to go here in the docs and double check how to use it and what it says about it. And indeed, as it says here, a link is an element that lets the user navigate from one page to another by clicking or tapping on it. It'll render an href, but it will control the behavior of it. And the main difference is that instead of href, we use this attribute to, or this prop to, when we're using link. There is a bit of a gotcha to be aware of. You almost always want to start your link with a slash. If you don't, it gets treated as a relative link, which is usually not what you want. So make sure that for most of the time, pretty much all the time, have your links start with a slash. So this is the link to the homepage. So it's just the root element, and we'll just say homepage. And here we'll say link to equals about, and we'll say about page. And now if I hop over here, I'm able to navigate. The page is not getting refreshed. My React application continues to run. So I just want to see if folks have any questions about the link component and how to use it and why it's important. Okay, awesome. Pretty straightforward. Does it feel relatively straightforward? Cool. It should be. Basically, instead of the href tag, we're now using the link tag with our React applications. All right, let's go ahead and build some Rick and Morty and use it as a chance to review some of these things. So let me hop over to the assignment because we've pretty much covered all the ground that we had in part 2 of the lecture already. The one thing I do want to mention is, you know, Francisco and I were digging a bit into the React Router docs about this nesting that we have here in the nested outlet. And we think it's fine. It works with React Router. That said, this logic can get tricky very fast the same way where if you have like 3 or 4 levels of inheritance with a Python OOP class, that can start to get complicated, even though each individual part is simple. So nested routes are great. Use them with care. Don't go nuts, at least for now. That's the one word of caution that I would add. And we've seen how to add a link component. And in fact, we've already added an error page with this not found error component that we've added here to the error element in router.jsx. All right, let's take a look at what the Rick and Morty assignment is, and then we can start building it. So over the next couple of days, you all are going to be building up a Rick and Morty site. It's going to need, for today, you should have an about page. It should talk to the Rick and Morty API to get some information. You should have a characters page. You should use the Bootstrap card component to show information for every character. You may want to, and you may need to use useState, useEffect, Axios, map, conditional rendering, the other things that we've been practicing. So this assignment today is really important. Let me just repeat that again. This assignment today is really important. This should probably be everyone's top priority, and your goal should be to have this completely done by tomorrow morning. Otherwise, you will start falling behind and it will be harder to catch up. You need routes for each page. You need an error route and a not found page. You need a nav bar and some tests with Cypress and some styling with Bootstrap. So let's start building this out together. Does that sound good to everyone? All right, let's do it. So I'm going to go ahead and make a Rick and Morty 2 project. That's going to be React, and it's going to be JavaScript. I want to make sure I'm in the right directory. I'm going to close out everything else so I don't get confused. And we'll close that one out. And let's go into Rick and Morty 2, and we can start building stuff. I think the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy the contents of this into here. And just break it up a bit just so I can see. And testing and the styling stuff, we're not going to get to that much today, though I will throw some Bootstrap into the mix. I'm going to go ahead and run npm install, right, to install the basic default dependencies. I'm going to do some cleanup, but once everything is kind of cleaned up, I'm going to start calling on all of you to help guide me through the process of building this application. And let's see, we got to get rid of this CSS right here. And I got to make sure that other CSS is gone. And I'm just going to turn this into a list. I'm just going to grab this. We're going to put this inside App.jsx, and we're going to make a to-do list. And I kind of know what needs to be in here, so let's just mark it out. We need a home page. We need an about page that gets data from Rick and Morty API. We need links to homepage and about page. I need a characters page that renders all the characters from Rick and Morty API. And it needs to use a Bootstrap card component. And my links need to be in a nav bar. And I'm just going to declare that we're going to use, we need to use the Bootstrap nav bar. And the tests and the styling, we're not going to worry about. I also need error page, or rather, I think it's called a not found page. Okay, and I think this is a pretty reasonable order to do stuff in. We'll get the home page, we create an about page, we maybe get some data, we create a nav bar, we add some links, and we can kind of add all these pieces as we go. So these are the features. Let's talk about the order in which to do this work. Right? What are my coding tasks? And can someone help me out here? Like, what do I need to do just to get this ball rolling?
We have to first create the component that we need to work with.
Yep, we're going to have to create our components and our directory structure for pages and components.
Yeah.
What about dependencies?
We need to create the route. We need to create the route.
Yep, we need to create routes. What routes do we need?
Route.jsx. What do you mean by what route?
Oh, well, we need to create router.jsx for sure. What are the routes that we need to put inside of that? What are the different paths? And you can phone a friend if you're not sure. Erica.
Would that be the about page, the character page, and so on?
Yeah, exactly. And thank you, Murad, as well. I'm going to start cycling through folks. So we got to create all these pages, right? The home page. We got to create the home page. We got to create the about page. But when I put them in router.jsx, I need to put something along with them, right? The path. So what are the paths for the home page and the about page? Not a trick question, I promise. Chris, yes, sir.
My bad. I was having him up for the other thing, but what was the question again?
Oh, yeah. Well, we need a couple paths, right? Like if we're gonna, in fact, let's just TL draw this out. Right. Chris, yes, sir.
No. Sorry, I don't know. I don't know why the hands are still up. Sorry.
No, you're good, man. So this is, I'll just make the URL bar red so we can identify it. And let's make this be, you know, the app. I want to see, let's say that this is app right here, right? And I know that I want a nav bar. And I know that I want a homepage. when we're looking at the home page, what's in the URL bar? Does it look like this? Does it look like this? What do we want it to be? Garrett, yes, sir.
Should just be that / like that, right?
Yeah, exactly. For the home page, we just have it be the root path, the index route. And you know what? In fact, let's go ahead and let's just go ahead and make the about page as long as we're doing this. And I guess for some reason it didn't copy my text, which is a little annoying. But here, when we're looking at the about page, what do I want in the URL bar now? Not a trick question. Brandon, yes, sir.
About page in the URL.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll add the nav bar. And this becomes about, right? So these are our paths. These are our routes. So the routes that we're going to need to create are going to be, you know, right, route for app for the home page. And we're going to need about, right, for the about page. What other routes do we need for our app? I know I need a characters page. So what do we want to call that route? Yes, I saw someone's hand go up. Chris, yes, sir.
Character?
Yeah, I think so as well. And are we showing all the characters or just one?
I want to say it's all the characters, ain't it? Well, if you pull up the README,
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah, I think you're correct. Characters page should show every character within Rick and Morty.
Yep. Cool.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll call this characters, plural, and then later on when we add, maybe there will be a page to view an individual character, then it'll be like character / you know, Summer, or character / Morty, or character / a different character from the show. And, you know, we'll have a characters page right here. And inside of it, you know, we'll probably have these bootstrap cards for each individual character themselves. So I'll just make this characters page. And inside here, we'll just say character, you know, and the card's a little big, but you all kind of get the idea. If I could just deselect what I want to. Right, we're gonna have a bunch of characters. And I think, do we need any other routes or pages? Erica, yes.
Mentions an error, so like something not being found.
Yeah, exactly. We do need a not found page. And so this one, I don't even know. We probably still want to show the nav bar. You know, we'll say like this URL doesn't exist. And this will be the not found page. Right, so this is nice because, you know, with this little bit of upfront planning and design, I can go ahead now and I can make a components directory, and I can make a pages directory. And more, like you're saying, we should probably make a page for each of these things. So the home page, I think I'll leave to App.jsx, though we might come back to that, but I'll make just about page .jsx. And let's go ahead and do about page. And it's just going to return fragment that's going to have an H2 that's going to say about, and that's all I need. I'm going to do export default about page. And someone was telling me that there's a really nice Emmet shortcut if I have Emmet working. I'm not sure if I do. Mikhail, you might have been saying this, that will kind of do all this for me.
Yes.
Let's see if I can, what was it? RF.
Yeah, RFCE, React Functional Component Export.
And I'm not,
Hmm.
I don't,
No, why it doesn't show up for you?
yeah, I know I have Emmet set up somewhere. I just never, I haven't used it a lot. I copy paste, but Emmet is honestly really useful. So I do think that's a good thing to get used to, and to use, folks. But if I'm copying and pasting my own code for a skeleton, that's okay too.
Oh, they
And
said
now-
it's the React snippets extension you have to install, React snippets, and then
Oh,
so it's
I may
a
have that installed.
yeah, React snippets extension.
You know, also with like the Vim keyboard shortcuts that I use, oh, but I didn't even have it installed. Let's see if that does it. Sometimes this stuff conflicts with keyboard shortcuts. Let's see if it works. But if not, that does look like a good one to explore.
And the one I have is actually the ES7 plus React snippets. Yeah, the 11 million one.
Oh yeah, that looks like a much better one. 11 million sounds better than 4. Thank you. Right, so Command P opens it, all these options. Let's see if I can get this to work. Yep, that looks like what you were talking about. RFCE. And now I can do, we'll call it the same thing. Yeah, that's awesome. If you could drop a link to that in the Slack, that would be
Okay.
a huge help. Yeah, I love that. Is, I think, it's going to be much nicer for everyone to use. I'm just so used to using Vim for stuff, but honestly, that was really slick. So the one thing I will caution you is typing, I think, does help with learning stuff. You don't want to become like reliant on the keyboard shortcuts, especially for an interview. But on the other hand, if it's like keeping you from making typos and it's for this sort of like basic skeleton code that we've already kind of covered, then it sure seems like a good use case. So we've made our pages, right? And as Morid pointed out, we're going to have to make router.jsx. But I also need to install some dependencies, right? What packages do I have to install so I can use React Router and I can use Bootstrap? Not a trick question, folks. Brandon, yes, sir.
You have to do npm install React Router DOM.
Yep.
And I forgot the one for Bootstrap. Probably just install Bootstrap or something.
Yep. Can anyone help Brandon remind me, what do I need to install for Bootstrap? Earl John, yes, sir.
I think it was npm install React-bootstrap.
Correct. we need to install the Bootstrap CSS library and the React Bootstrap UI component library. And Earl John, once I've installed Bootstrap, do I have to do any extra, what extra setup do I have to do so that it'll work?
You have to, there was to import the Bootstrap into the main.
Yep, I have to import. And I'm going to do this before my index.css. Let's see, where did I go wrong here? I'm just going to open up the node modules directory and see where it's hiding. If we go to Bootstrap and we go to dist and we go to CSS, there's like 1,000 things, but what we want is bootstrap.min.css. So that should do it. I'm not sure why.
You don't have to put the Bootstrap in there. I think it's just import and then the.
Oh yeah, you're so right, because it's just CSS. Thank you so much. Beautiful. That makes more sense now. And now that I've done that, I think Bootstrap should work. Let's test it out. We know we're going to want to make a navbar component. So let's just go ahead and do navbar.jsx. And I'm going to use that awesome RFCE with that snippet. And we're just going to call it navbar. And it was really smart and it figured out the name from the file name. And I am just going to pull up the Bootstrap React docs. And we're going to look at the list of components. We're going to go find the navbar. And we're going to import everything we need. I am going to run the Vite dev server. Oh, and if I type the right command, that would help. Because I do want to make sure that my code is working. And actually, I can tell that Bootstrap, that CSS was correct because I see that style being applied here, which is great. And that was part of the reason why I wanted to make the Bootstrap navbar right off the bat. I still think I'm going to do it now just to make sure that I've installed everything correctly. And I am just going to copy this example, and then we're going to modify it. And there is a naming issue here that I know I'm going to get confused on. So I'm going to name the function here my navbar, and we're going to change this to my navbar. Now I should change the file name as well, but I'm going to be a little lazy for the moment and not worry about it. And let's go ahead and import this into App.jsx. So the nice thing about default exports is we actually can give them whatever name we want. So I can just, here where I import it, use the name navbar, and fingers crossed that should work just fine for me. Let's see how we're doing. And so indeed, we've got that navbar there, which is great. Let's get rid of this H1. And let's go ahead and just clean up this navbar just enough. So instead of React Bootstrap, let's call this Rick and Morty. And we know we want the home page. We're going to worry about the links later, but we know we're going to want the about page and we're going to want the characters page. And I don't need this drop down at all. So I'm just going to delete it. And now I should have home, about, characters. And we'll see in a minute. I don't even need home because this will become a link that goes home, but we'll cross that bridge in a moment when we get there. So I know I've got Bootstrap up and working, which is great. Let's tackle React Router. Can someone remind me, now that we've installed React Router, what are the things I have to do to start adding routing here? What's my next step? Chris, yes, sir. Or I'm sorry, Daniel. Excuse me.
You gotta
The
make
palm trees got me.
you gotta make a router.jsx file, right? In the page. Oh wait, no, in the source.
Yeah, correct. Router.jsx is not a page or a component. Sort of like app.jsx and main.jsx. It's a little special, so we put it right here. And what do I need to use from the React Router DOM library to create my router here in router.jsx, Daniel?
You have to import. You have to import. I think it's like create
Browser router.
Yeah.
browser router.
Thank you, Morad. Create browser router. And let me make sure that it's declared, but its value is never used. Perfect. Let's go ahead and let's just create the routing object. Though in fact, I don't even really need to create the variable, do I? Because we don't do anything with it. So let's just do export default create browser router. And what do I pass inside create browser router? And Daniel, you can phone a friend.
Inside create browser router, we're gonna pass the create the browser router, the path. The array including the dictionary, the object of the path, the element, and the children.
Yeah. And so Murad, I've got my array. What do I need to put inside the array?
First thing, the path
Where does the path go?
inside the dictionary.
Yeah, exactly. Inside a JavaScript object.
Yeah.
And which path are we making here?
The backslash.
Yep.
The home.
And what else needs to go here for this route?
The element, which is the app.
Yep.
And then the children.
Awesome.
Which
And
is the home. Yeah, the home page.
I was gonna say, who would you like to pass the mic to? Can you pick someone who hasn't gone yet to help me build out the children?
Yeah, go Len. Where's Len?
Len. All right, Len, we've got a JavaScript object. We've got a path. We've got a component. But we probably need to add some children to here. So what needs to go inside this children property for my router?
I have not gotten there yet. Daniel?
Okay. Can you?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh.
Garrett. Yeah, I appreciate you calling on Daniel. I want to mix it up a bit.
That's true. That's a good. Yeah, I was gonna. Fair enough.
Yeah, but much appreciated, Garrett.
I meant
yes, sir.
Garrett.
Great minds.
Would you do
Great minds.
a dictionary inside that children array? And then do
Yep.
index true and then element homepage?
Yep, this is good so far. There is one issue with this line of code. It has nothing to do with index true or element homepage. Both of this is great. This is the right approach, but there's one step that I actually forgot to do.
Yeah, Earl John can go. I'm not sure.
Okay,
Import,
Earl John, thank you.
import the homepage.
Yep, I need to import it.
Import, yeah.
There's one problem with importing it.
On the homepage, you have to do the outlet.
There's no homepage.
Yep, thank you, Erica. I forgot to create the homepage component. It doesn't exist yet. Otherwise, you guys are all on the right path. So let me go ahead and make that now. I didn't think we were going to need it, but I think it probably makes sense so that we don't have to put this work in app. So let's just do RFCE with that awesome, the awesome admin shortcut that Mikhail showed us. And now I have a home page, and we'll just leave it like that. And now I can actually import it. Right, and now I can do index is true. And I forgot a comma here, right? That's why I'm seeing the red squiggly by children. So it looks like I might have a formatting issue. Oh, maybe.
Complaining that you're not naming it.
Yeah, maybe I was trying to get too fancy. Problem solved. So I've got app, I've got homepage. Can someone, let's see here, Cody, how do I add the about page to my routing?
Add the about page to the routing. You do the same thing. You do just create the next element in your array, make it an object, index : space true comma, element : space, and then just put about page instead of home page, the same as line 12. And then a comma at the end of line 17. I guess if you're going to make another one, you will.
Yep. Murad, yes, sir.
I think, and when we create the about page, we will not make the index true. We will add the path.
That is correct.
Yeah. Thank you.
And thank you, Mobo. Yeah, so Cody, you're on the right path. Index is a little special. That's how we tell the router there is no extra path to this path. It's just going to be the slash. The about page, we want the URL to be about, right? So we need to tell it like so. So you're probably only going to set index to true for your homepage in app. And can someone remind me, how do I add the error page to my routing? And then we probably have enough where we can switch gears and try stuff out. Raven.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh yeah, no, I'm just gonna call on a couple folks. Raven, how can I add my error page, my not found page that I created to my routing? And you can phone a friend if you're not sure.
So your comma, another dictionary.
The error page is a little different because the error page is going to be like if I put in something that's totally wrong, like foobar or this does not exist or whatever it is. I want the error page to show up for all of those. So there's a specific way we do that with the React router.
Can I say what? How to do it? You gotta be parallel to. Yeah. Okay.
Please, if Raven wants to phone and pass it on to you, you totally can. And thank you for checking Momo. Yeah, Raven, give it a shot. If you're not sure, you can phone a friend.
Jared put something in the chat. It says error element, not found page.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't add this to children. I add this to the JavaScript object for my root route for the app component. And we add an error element property and we set the not found page here. Right, so the error element we handle a little differently. So now fingers crossed. There's something I forgot. And maybe Tim, can you maybe help remind me? We've written this router, but nothing's showing up. What do I have to do, say here in like main.jsx to get my router actually hooked up now that I've created it? Okay, I'm going to move from Tim to Polly.
Sorry, I didn't know I was muted. I said create a function that calls the app.
Oh, close. We don't actually create a function. I'm going to need to use the router that we created in router.jsx. But there's a specific way that we add this. Murad, yes, sir.
We're gonna import the router provider.
Yeah, exactly. We have to use a special component called router provider. And I'm not sure why I wasn't getting the autocomplete there, but that should do it. And we set router provider. So this is a special component that will handle rendering everything for us. And this is what we want to mount on the DOM, on that ID element. Right, and if we look at our component tree, we see that it starts with the router provider and does all sorts of stuff. And over here, we got Rick and Morty. And if I go to the About page, that actually doesn't seem to be working. And in fact, there's something that I forgot that we need to add to make this actually work and show up. So Polly, now that we've used the router provider, there is something I have to do to App.jsx to get stuff from React Router actually rendering in the browser. So React Router can actually show stuff on the screen. What's the final step we have to do here?
I am not sure. I'll pass it on to Erica.
Okay. Oh, sounds good. Erica.
Is it by any chance adding an outlet?
That is exactly it. Right. This is like the special wormhole component that React Router actually uses to render stuff. Right. So the router object that we created is all the logic that says what component is associated with path, but then outlet is how React Router actually renders it. And so we need to put outlet in app.jsx. And as we can see, there's this component outlet. There's something called React context that we'll sort of learn about later. And then inside the outlet is rendered the About page. And if I change this and I go to my home page, that outlet component is still there, but now inside it is rendered the home page. Right. So now let's go ahead. Let's make a couple links. Let's go ahead and make these links work. I'm going to go ahead and import the link component from React Router DOM. And Erica, yes, what's up?
I had a question for the error page. if we put it outside of the children, if we put it outside of the children, if we have an error, that would mean it goes to a new page, a page not found kind of new page. So wouldn't that mean that we have to go backwards in order to go back to the homepage, the Rick and Morty homepage? Wouldn't we also kind of need like a page not found or some kind of error that keeps the nav bar visible, so we can, I don't know, instead of having to load back the previous page? I don't know if it makes any sense.
That's a good point. So you raise a good point that the error element, the error page, in fact, does not get rendered inside app. And I think that's just how the error page works. Excuse me. And you're right, we would want to keep the nav bar there. So how can we do that? How can I add the nav bar to this page? Not a trick question. Chris, yes, sir.
Don't you import navbar?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so Erica, great call. And the good news is that this is where React is kind of awesome, is that, well, since the nav bar is a component, we can just import it here. And we can add like a not found div. And now we've got a much nicer not found page. Yeah, excellent call. And actually kind of building on that, the next step is we want to add some links to the homepage. So Bootstrap nav link has an interesting property because there's kind of two ways to do this, right? One is maybe inside here, we have to do like link to equals that, and then set it to home. I'm not sure what that's for. And that should work for us. Hopefully without a page refresh. But Bootstrap actually gives us a nicer way to do this. So I did want to point this out specifically because this is kind of useful. Let's see, I have to hunt up the navbar link component. Let's see if they show it here. Otherwise, because I do want to show you all the docs. Bootstrap navbar link as other component. Yeah, I may have a hard time finding the docs for this, so let me just show it in practice. So instead of doing this, what I can do is I can do nav link as, and I can tell Bootstrap, hey, I want you to keep like the CSS style and sort of UI behavior of this cool nav link component. But what I actually want you to use is this other component named link to actually do the work. And now I believe this will work for us. Fingers crossed. Yeah, and we're not getting any page refreshes. So same result as above, but keeps the Bootstrap UI look and feel. for the link. Right, so this is actually really nice to use with Bootstrap, though it's not critical, but it's good to know. So I did want to point that out. And let's have this point to our characters page. And here we should be able to do the same thing, fingers crossed, as equals link, and then to, and then this is our home page. And so now if that worked properly, Rick and Morty takes us home and it uses React Router DOM to do it. And so now we have some very nice behavior in there. Okay, so it is 12:15 and I realize we have gone a bit long. Let me take one or two questions, and I think I just want to demo one more thing and then we'll call it. Chris, did you have a question?
Well, since you asked, are we gonna have another break where we can work on this? I'm trying to grasp these concepts, but it's like different things happen at once, and I just want I need some more practice because I'm lost.
For sure. You're all afternoon is going to be working on this, and let me actually, I'm doing it on my phone, but we don't have any guest speakers today. So today is work time, and this is the assignment for today.
Okay.
Yeah, and thank you for letting me know and giving me a heads up, because I realize I have been jumping around a lot. Like, is there one spot in particular that feels like, hey, this is the part that I'm finding the most confusing right now?
Well, every time I find something confusing and it goes to a different thing, so I get confused in multiple layers. But here, I guess we can start here. I was just writing it out. So where did you get the text for nav? You just copy and paste that from Bootstrap, correct? For
Exactly.
the nav. Okay.
Correct. Yeah, I totally copied their example. I didn't even try to, you know, their docs are amazing, but they give kind of ready to go examples for a reason. And this nav bar is kind of complex because it's like these 4 different components working together. So honestly, for the nav bar, copying and pasting it is the way to go.
Okay, that solves one issue. So I guess I wait until another one. But thank you.
For sure. And just to reiterate, you know, we saw the React Router link component that we can use to make a link so we don't have a page refresh. And then what I was demoing now with Bootstrap is Bootstrap gives us a way to use it, but still have like whatever Bootstrap's nav link component is doing is probably doing some really nice like styling and like subtle user interface features. Like home here is a different color. You can see like, and there's a lot of other things. So by using as, we tell Bootstrap, hey, under the hood, I actually want you to use this component. And when you do, here's the prop to give it, right? The same prop that we use here. But for like CSS and styling and all the stuff that you do really well, Bootstrap, use your normal nav link component. Tim, yes, sir.
So is it like you start on the outside, the nav bar, the outside shell, and then inside of that shell, you got your container. I'm new to JSX and HTML, but how I understanding it is like you build from the outside in, or is it easier to build from the inside out? To
Build
like
from the
where you
outside
want
in.
your link. Outside in, always?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And again, specifically for the Bootstrap navbar, I just copied this and used this. So it is worth, this is a live editor. So it like one good way, if you kind of want to get more familiar with what's happening here, is just go to the Bootstrap docs and start playing with stuff. Like if I want to remove a link and it's updated, right? But yes, you will need to spend a little time looking at the docs or possibly doing some previous assignments if this is less comfortable before diving in. But again, for navbar, just copy and paste it from Bootstrap. The one thing I did want to show, and then I think we'll break, is making an API call to the Rick and Morty API. And if I check out the README from the Rick and Morty assignment, the About page wants us to show some general information about the show. So let's open up this About page component. And let me go to the Rick and Morty API and find a good API endpoint to hit to get some general information about the show. So I think a list of all episodes is maybe a good example of some general information about the show. The way I'm going to test to make sure I know how to use this API correctly is I'm going to use ThunderClient. So I'm going to open up ThunderClient and paste in that URL. And the docs are telling me it's an HTTP GET request. So fingers crossed, that sends back everything that I need. And indeed, it does send me back a bunch of JSON. And I see here some general information, more episode lists. And then I see results is an array of objects. And I see that inside is each episode. Right? And I'm getting, how many episodes do I get here? It looks like I get maybe 20 per page. But it's giving me the link right here in next to get the next episodes, which I'm not going to have to worry about now, but might be useful to do later. So, right, it's telling me how to do the pagination. And in fact, I can look here. Here's the URL to make an API call to get the next set of episodes. And then I see here when I've finally gotten all of them, it's null. So I'm not going to worry too much about that now, but if I want to get all of the episodes, that's something quite useful to know and be aware of. So let's write a little code to actually get these episodes. I'm just going to code through this just so we can see it, and then we'll break. I'm going to go ahead and install Axios, which we're going to use for our HTTP requests. I'm going to go ahead and import Axios from Axios. And I think that should do it. So I'm going to import some React component state. I'm going to need to use the use state hook. And I'm going to need to use the use effect hook to make my API call. And I know I'm going to get back, an array of episodes. So I'll leave that there. I know I'm going to need to make an API call to get my episodes. So I'm going to write an async function. We're going to call it get episodes. And we are going to have it be an async function. It is going to take a page as an argument. And we are going to do const results equals await Axios get. And now let's do a tagged template literal with episode page equals. And I always forget this syntax. I think it looks like that. So I can use this to get page 1 or page 2 or page 3 and so on. So fingers crossed that'll do what I need. I'm not going to worry about getting multiple pages right now, but I know I probably will later, so I might as well write the code for it. And I think what I'm going to do is something like, once I get the episodes, I'm going to do set episodes, and we're going to construct a new array of the existing episodes, and we're going to add on to it whichever episodes we got, right? Combine any episodes we already have with the ones we just got in a new array. And this way, maybe I'm going to be using this function to like get page 1 of episodes, page 2, page 3, and they can just get all added together. Because I think eventually what I want is I want to show all the episodes on the about page. But for now, I'm just going to get it started by grabbing the first episode. So, but now I've got some logic set up for later. And I do need to put this in a use effect hook. And the reason I need to do this is so that React, first of all, knows that this code should only run after this component first renders. And second of all, so React knows that we're making an API call and it can synchronize other things and we don't end up with a race condition, which is a kind of bug that can be very hard to figure out when two things don't always take the same amount of time. Like if it takes 50 milliseconds longer to get our data back from the Rick and Morty API. And so I'm just going to call get episodes and we'll pass in 1. And fingers crossed, that should get us all the episodes from page 1 and put them in the episodes list. And let's go ahead and console log this and see if it works. And then if it does, we'll actually render it to the screen and show some stuff, but let's just make sure that I didn't do something silly here. And it looks like I made an error in my nav bar. A cannot appear as a descendant, though it's not actually breaking anything, but it's not very good. And it looks like the error not clearly telling me where it's coming from. So let's see if we can quickly find it and fix it. I think I'm just going to ignore it for now, to be honest, because it's not breaking stuff and I want to stay focused on getting this working. As long as I can navigate to my about page, I should be good to go. So I can navigate to my about page. And my API call is indeed returning data, but I'm not doing something right in handling it because I'm not seeing it printed out here. I end up with undefined. So maybe I did something wrong in how I grabbed this data. So I'm just going to console log right here and just say API, episode list response, and we'll put results right there. And let's see what that looks like. And indeed, I forgot that Axios adds an extra layer because we have some sort of information about the HTTP request, sort of metadata. So the information I want is inside a data object. So to help me not make that mistake again, I'm going to rename this to response. We're going to put that there. And now here, I'm just going to say response.data.results. And now, fingers crossed, if I refresh the page, we've got an array of the first 20 episodes. And so now let's go ahead and render them. and let's render them conditionally. So let's use a ternary and say if episodes.length is truthy, if episodes.length is 0, the ternary will evaluate that as false. If it's anything but 0, it will be evaluated as true. And so if we have some episodes in our episodes array, let's do a map statement, and let's do E for episode and I for index. And I'm just going to do something really simple just to get the ball rolling here. And I'm just going to make a div with a key of index so React can keep track and not freak out when we have a whole list of things, right? Which is what it needs. And let's make this a tagged template literal. So let's say name e.name. And how about air date e.air date. And over here, let's do maybe episode e.episode. So now that I've gotten that array with my API call, and I'm using use effect so React can keep track of stuff. And it looks like I may have a missing curly bracket somewhere. So I'm going to do a little bit of double checking. Maybe I'm missing. So I made a little bit of a syntax error somewhere. So let's hunt that down. And then fingers crossed, we're going to be good to go. Oh, and in fact, what I'm missing is I need to do what not to do with this ternary, right? And this ternary is getting kind of huge. So in fact, in a minute, we're going to refactor it. But for now, let's just give it what to say if we don't have any episodes. And it looks like I have some sort of mistake going on here. So I thought we were awfully close because we have the array and we're listing everything out. So at this point, especially because stuff is getting a little complex, let's see here. React use effect has a missing dependency. Get episodes, either include it or move the dependency array. Actually not familiar with what that warning is. So for the moment, I'm going to ignore it. To simplify this a bit, I think I'm going to make a little functional component that I'll call episode. And we can move it somewhere else later, but I just want to get like my stuff working. So let's just do episode e dot episode and name e dot name. And over here, let's simplify some of this because this is an awful lot, right? And this is probably where I was making my mistake. Let's do we'll call it excuse me, I'm getting a little lost in the weeds here, but I think we're almost done. So that should be my functional component. And then I should be able to use it right here as such. And the one bit I was missing, and I do apologize, is let's call this just info will be the name of that prop. So I think we're almost home. It looks like there's one more error. JSX value should either be an expression or quoted JSX text. And I have a very easy to fix typo right here. The index I need to pass in inside the curly brackets. I'm still not seeing what I expected to see. So now that I have this broken up into a separate component, I can debug it more easily. And let's see what's going on, if we can fix this. Otherwise, we might have to circle back. Oh, and I made the world's, I don't want to say the world's simplest mistake, but it was sort of a mistake that we really kind of called out. And in fact, it has nothing to do with this at all. And I'm pretty sure, and this illustrates kind of the trickiness of use effect, but why it's also useful. Let's see if that, no, that's an infinite loop. Yeah, so I apologize, folks. We should, I'm not sure what I'm doing wrong here. I think we almost got home, because we indeed are getting the list of all the episodes and we're printing them out. But for some reason, I'm not getting my mapping through this to work correctly. And I am curious if I just do like episodes sub 0 dot name, what happens. Yeah, so I do apologize. I was hoping this part could get demoed pretty quickly. I've run into an error where probably just trying to debug it live is hitting diminishing returns. We're getting the data correctly. The issue I'm running into now is something with React and the proper ordering of things. Because what ends up happening is I get the episodes, but I've like rendered the component before then. So I may need to just tweak this a bit to see what's going wrong and fix it offline and share the code later. If anyone does see something jumping out, please let me know, but we've gone on longer than I intended. So thank you folks for sticking around. Hopefully though, what you can see here is the basic outline of using a use effect and an async function. right? And then using .map to render that data. Although there's something in here that I got off with. So let me pause here and stop the recording, and then we can break and get lunch and dive into writing code in the afternoon.